Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. I figured I'd jersey it up today. You know, got my Astros gear and everything on. So, you guys might not know, but this is, maybe you have seen it in the back of the video, but this is a personalized jersey from when they won the championship in 2017. So it has my name on it. You guys normally see it hanging back there, but I figured I'd pop it on today. So, you know, to all of my people in the Philippines, Magandang umaga, kamusta na, mabuhay ingat lagi, masaya kang makinig kang muli. And I'm going to try this phrase again. Maraming salamat po sa nanonood ng aking mga video. I think it's nanonood. Nanonood. Okay. Yeah, I was told I was saying that right, so hopefully I got it better. And it's not nanonood. So forgive me if that sounds weird to you or whatever. But I have Romanian and Azerbaijani. So for my people from Romania, I have, what was it? Man, I'm killing it. So let me see to my Azerbaijani people. Salam and Qc2 for coming by and taking a look. Man, what is it? Man, Buna. Okay, that was what I had Dimanata in my mind. Buna Dimanata. And Mulțumesc. Appreciate you guys for stopping by. It took me a minute, forgive me. You know, if you guys are ready to go, I heard about this game and I actually saw bits and pieces of it. And I've had some, you know, some comments on it and stuff like that. And so I just figured I'd go ahead and do it. We do have a rest day. So if you guys are ready to go, which I think you are, let's take a look. All right, so we got knight to f3, d5, e3, e6, c4. So we do have, in this position, you can either basically call it a ready or an English. You know, I've seen English Agincourt and also just seen a plain ready. When you start the game with just knight to f3, a majority of the time, if not always, it transposes into something else. But, you know, it's kind of a hybrid mix between like a ready and, you know, like an English type situation. So we got bishop to e7. And something else I'm going to note. If you are looking for a game that follows chess principles and follows the rules and everybody plays nice and you know, fundamentally and stuff like that, this ain't the game for you. This game is like super crazy and like literally nobody follows the rules in this entire game. So just letting you know that off top. So we got b3 and then we have bishop to f7. So this is the first time like a rule is broken. So you see Shakhriyar Mamedyarov moving the bishop 2 separate times. Now, there's a very real threat behind it. Of course, you know, you're threatening this rook in the corner. So, I mean, you know, it's kind of legitimate for you to kind of break the rules and stuff like that. But you will see a lot more to come. So the knight comes to c3, blocking the bishop. So we got knight to e7. Bishop comes to b2. And we do see c5, and then we see queen to c2. Now, something I'm going to mention about this particular position. In 2018, we had a game, Lenka versus Vatier, where we did see a similar position. And so if we were to go back in that game, if b6, if in this game, if b6 is actually played and then we see g3, this does snap us into the game that we saw. After bishop came to b2, in that particular game, we saw b6, queen coming to c2, and then we saw c5. So you guys can kind of see like, you know, how you would pretty much be in that same game. Coming back to what we had in the game, we saw queen to c2, and then we did see knight b to c6. So this makes it the novelty of the game. So this is the true novelty of the position. Because we did not see b6. So that is the key that we did not see. So we do see knight coming to a4. And so now we have another rule broken. You know, so this is the second time this knight is moved. Second time this bishop is moved. But that is not all. We will get into more. So b6 comes. Bishop takes on f6. We got pawn taking f6. Pawn taking d5. Queen taking d5. We got knight down to c3. So now the knight moves again. We got queen over to h5. We have knight moving to e4. So this is like the fourth time that pawn that knight has moved. So it's on quite a bit of a journey. We got queen over to g6. Now we have to kind of knock the queen away because you know, we do kind of have some issues. So the knight comes to h4, knocking the queen over to h6, and then we see knight to d6 with check. King comes to f8, knight takes c8, rook takes c8, and then we see g3. So like up to this point in the game, like I said, if you want like a regular, like everybody's following the principles and stuff, and it's kind of like, you know, just your average traditional game, this ain't the one for you. We saw White's knight move like 4 times. Black is not castled. Like, I mean, the file is open. Like, this knight moved twice. Like, this is the craziness that you want if you want that nice and juicy, you know, pawn, like, you know, pieces moving everywhere, all types of stuff going on. So we see rook over to d8. Bishop comes to e2, king comes to g7, a3, making sure that we prevent b2. We got rook to d6, we got f4, rook h to d8. We see rook to d1, having to protect that pawn. We see f5, knight comes back to f3, knight to d5, and then we see castles by white. So pretty much so far in the game, the only principle that's really been followed so far is the castle by white. So move 22 is like the first fundamental, you know, move that we've seen in the entire game. So like I said, literally they just took like the chess fundamentals from Capablanca and just tossed it out the window. And they say, we're not even going to be playing chess like that. We're going to play chess a whole different type of way. This must be like 2021 chess that we're playing here. We got king back to g8. We see rook over to b1. We have a5. Bishop comes to b5. Knight C comes to e7. And the crazy thing about the position that you're looking at right now is that for the last couple of moves, it says it's dead drawn. It literally is giving triple zeros for everything. Like, there's multiple different moves that white and black can make, and it's just a complete draw, is what the computer is saying. But, you know, we know the computer is crazy. The computer's like, yeah, man, like, just play like this, and then it's fine. And you're like, huh? At least that's what I say. But it does get better. I promise you this. So the rook f comes to d1. Knight comes back to f6. We see bishop back to f1. We got knight down to g4. We have h3. Knight comes to f6. We see d3. Knight comes down to c6. So, like, basically you guys see that pretty much black and white are they're doing a lot of different maneuvering. So it's a back and forth struggle that's been occurring. So we got rook over to e1. You know, we're not really worried about, you know, unprotecting this pawn that much because, I mean, black is going to have to give up a rook, you know, kind of sack the exchange to get that pawn. So it's probably not going to be worth it. So the queen comes back to g7. We have queen over to f2, making sure that we kind of defend against, you know, some threats that we have from black because, you know, we are eyeing this pawn. Of course, you know, knight can come to h5 and put some more pressure on it. So we have king over to h8. Just to be extra safe, you know, whenever you have an open file against your king, it's not usually the best thing to leave that rook on the file, especially in this particular situation. You do have this open file, so you do really kind of want a rook to swing over there. So that's pretty much what's being prepared. So we got king over to h2. We have rook over to g8, like I was saying. Bishop comes to e2. We have knight over to d5. And we have reached a point in the game that I would like for you to guess what the best move for white in this particular position is. Go ahead and do so. Okay, cool. So for those of you that are actually looking at the board and you're kind of feeling like what white might be feeling in this particular game, like you can sense that there is a lot of pressure being kind of thrown down on this king's position, you know, that you do have the ability to possibly try to open this rook up to add extra pressure to it. So you really need to play a defensive move in this position. And the move that we actually see in the game, where we're going to get more into it in a bit, is actually bishop to f1, and that is not the correct move to play in this particular position. So hopefully nobody chose that. Hopefully everybody out there recognized the danger and played the move rook to g1. This is really what you have to play in this position to try to defend, because white is in a very like peculiar situation here, and you do have to play some very cautious moves. So as long as you are able to play rook to g1, you are not worried about e5 because you have added extra defense to the g3 pawn. So as you guys can see, you know, you got the rook, you got the queen, you got the knight, or you got the king. King, queen, and rook all, you know, basically make sure they protect. That's not what was played. That was a mistake. But like I said, after you do see the move e5, it doesn't have as much sting to it because you'll see, Lord, I'm all over the place. Rook to g1, e5, you will take on e5 with the pawn. The knight would take on e5, and then you have your own kind of like a little, you know, counter threat after knight comes to h4. Because as you guys can see, you are threatening this pawn, and after you get the pawn, you are threatening to fork the rook and the queen. So that is a nice counterattack that white has, and you're not so worried about this particular situation here. So we do see knight coming to c3. We got d4, pawn taking d4, pawn taking d4, and then if you did so happen to capture on b1, you would actually be able to capture on f5, and then the rook would come to f6, but you have a really, really nice in-between move, and you have pawn takes e5. So you do have a bishop versus a knight, and you do have an extra pawn in this situation. So you are doing very, very good as white in this particular position. But like I said, after knight to d5, we did see bishop come down to f1. And the unfortunate thing about bishop to f1 is it does like basically make a rook movement to try to defend impossible. So now after e5 comes in this particular position, it is somewhat dangerous. But you do actually still have the ability to counterattack, kind of similar to what we saw before. Knight to h4. And then you have the ability to kind of put like a nice little counterattack in here. Now, I will say it is not the best for white. Like, you're not doing great, but you're definitely not losing on the spot. Now, backing up to what we had, e5 came, and then we saw e5, and then pawn takes e5, and unfortunately, this just completely loses the game on the spot. Because of what I mentioned earlier, you are trying to swing the rook over to g6. And the problem now is that you don't have the ability really to defend your position because your rooks are cut off by the bishop. So after we see rook to g6, you know, Lupulescu does try to go knight to h4, but then we see rook taking g3. And there just really isn't much you can try to do in this position. You know, Lupulescu is thinking about, you know, the pressure that is on e5. You know, as you guys will see coming up in a second, that's not the biggest thing to worry about. You got d4, queen coming to g5, and you have a real issue now with your knight being undefended. There is really nowhere to move it safely. Because if you do try to like kind of come back and say, hey man, I'm gonna try to put a little counterattack on you, you will be looking at rook takes f3. Super exclam, and then the queen is gonna probably be having to take because there is no way to you know, to really defend, and then the queen is going to be coming down to g1 with checkmate. You can possibly try to move the queen over this way, but unfortunately you're going to be looking at the rook coming back over, and you know, like where do you go? Like, what do you do? Like, there really is not much to do. I mean, you just dropped the piece, so it's like, I mean, there's just no way to defend that. So going back after queen to g5, we did see knight coming back to g2, but this is lost as well because pawn takes d4, pawn takes d4. We have knight takes d4, and it is actually in this position that Lupulescu does resign the game, and I will tell you exactly why. Now, I always say when you get in positions where you have to, like, you know, the computer basically starts telling you that it wants you to just start throwing pieces away. This is that exact position. So if we get, I'm just going to show you just a few moves that the computer actually wants you to play. The first move that the computer wants you to play is rook to e3. And I mean, you guys can see that that's, I mean, like, it's just literally throwing your rook in the trash. You got the knight defending and you also have the rook defending. So, like, I mean, it's just not pretty. That's one of the options that the computer gives you. Another one is bishop to e2, which seems really strange because it just completely undefends your knight on g2. And that is something that the computer is saying you have to play. There's also rook to e4. I mean, I don't really think I have to say anything about this move. Backing up, there is also king to g1. And this is just a few of the options that the computer is giving you that is, like, you know, top moves to play. King to g1, you're going to be looking at knight comes to f3. And you absolutely have to give up your queen. That is the only way to postpone checkmate. It doesn't, like, alleviate checkmate. Like, you're still getting mated, just not as quick. And so the rook takes f3 here. And I mean, like I said, I mean, you don't want to be white. Like, we don't want to be white here. So like I said, after we saw the queen come to g5, knight to g2, and then we saw knight taking d4. Lupulescu did resign the game. It's just really interesting, like, you know, if you just kind of make like one defensive move at that point in the game, like I showed before, it would have been way different. It was actually holdable in that position. Or after e5 is pushed, playing knight to h4 just to try to defend and counterattack and prevent rook to g6. That was definitely something else, you know, that was playable. And maybe you could have survived it. Maybe you could have drawn something like that. But so that is unfortunate. But for all of my people in the Philippines, I think I'm getting a little bit better, but let's see. I have Maayong Buntog, Mayad na Agahan, Naibeg na Bigat, Masantos ya Kawasan, Marhe na Aga, Buenos Dias, Maayong Aga. That's where it gets tough. Mapia na Uma, Kapion Kapunu Dios. I have Mayap a Abak, Mayad na Aga. I'm pretty sure that's right. Yes, Mayad na Aga. Mapia Agay, Mapia Kapapita, and then I have, and it's a block, I think, my big Abukla, and then Marajad na Buntog. So as you can see, I'm getting a little bit better flowing through them. Just got to give me a little bit more time. I think maybe 4 or 5 more days, and I'll be pretty solid on everything for the most part. But I appreciate you guys very much for coming by, and I will see y'all next time.